Okay, well, it's after 3:30, so we might get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And just to let you know that we're recording this session to enable us to share the webinar for teachers who aren't able to get to this session, and for yourselves as well as a resource for later on. And we'll be popping it up on our website so you can access it there. So welcome to the first Agribusiness Gateway to School Industry Schools program webinar for 2026. Thanks for our panellists for coming along, and thank you teachers as well for attending online. It's great to have you here, and we really understand it's a busy part of the term, so we appreciate you coming along. My name is Catherine Taboni and I work for CQU as a part of the Ag Education team, and we're one of the facilitators of the state government funded Gateway to Industry program. Lily is also joining us, so thank you very much, Lily. She's a member of our team and she'll be helping us with the Q&A and any tech that you have. So CQU, we facilitate the Gateways program in partnership with AgriFutures Australia, QADA, Queensland Agricultural Teachers Association, and Ag4 School to Industry Partnership Program, so SIP. I think a lot of you will be used to it being called SIP. So the Gateways program itself is a 3-year program and we're into the 2nd year, and there's 2 different streams to our Gateway program. So there's a stream 1 where we work intensively with 15 different schools across the state to implement an agricultural education program and to also link them with industry. And then there's stream 2 where we work with a different group of schools, and some of them are our stream 1 schools, but also a wider catchment of schools, and we work with them and we develop a module, so an industry-based module that we do some incursions with schools with, and we have webinars such as this one. So last year we had 4 different webinars and we based those around careers in ag, and we spoke to experts around aquaculture, the sugar industry, horticulture, and agribusiness and agri-finance. If you're interested in those webinars, they're on our website as well, so jump online and have a look at those webinars. So this year we've got 4 different ones that we'll be implementing, and this is our first one around poultry. We're looking at running a session in term 2, week 2, about how to start and integrate ag into your school. And then our 3rd webinar this year will be around developing and maintaining industry connections. And the 4th one is around aquatic sisters, so getting aquatic systems up at your school. Thank you to the teachers who have already RSVP'd to those different webinars. We'll be popping in a calendar invite once we've determined the dates for the 3rd and 4th webinar. Excellent. So part of the webinars is really to get you to hear from industry experts and learn from industry around different parts of ag, and assist you with some industry connections as well. This year, what we've decided to do is add a live Q&A session part to the session at the end of the webinar, so you can actually ask your questions, particularly about your school, to the experts that are online. So as I said, our first one is around poultry. So we're very fortunate to have 2 experts in the room with us, Dr. Amy Moss and Robin Richards, who will both be talking to you about careers in the poultry industry. You can hear about some of the latest research, and then also some school-friendly poultry trials for the classroom. We'll kick off, so there'll be 2 presentations of about 15 to 20 minutes each, and then at the end we'll have the Q&A session. If you've got any sort of questions that come to your mind during the presentation, just pop them in the chat and we can address them later on. Or if you want to hold on to them and ask directly with the experts, feel free to do that as well. Okay, so we might kick off with Dr. Amy Moss. So thank you everyone for being here, and I'll stop sharing my screen so we can hear from our expert, Dr. Amy Moss.
Thanks very much, Lily. Alrighty, so just to give you some bit of background on my current position, I'm a poultry scientist here at the University of New England. That's in Armidale in New South Wales. I work for UNE as a research scientist. I'm also a part of Poultry Hub Australia, which is like a research centre for poultry. So I grew up on the south coast of New South Wales, and that's where I went to school. And I absolutely love science and animals. but I, like many young people, had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do or what would come next. I knew sort of that I wanted to go to university and see where that would take me, but I wasn't really sure what kind of degree I should do. And there's so many different STEM degrees out there, and I had no idea really what a career in STEM might look like. And unfortunately, at that time, I didn't really get much information from my school about the different STEM careers that I could go through. So for science, I sort of just thought like NCIS was a pretty big show on at the time. I thought, well, being a scientist is really just, being in a lab and working on samples, and that's pretty much all you do. And then I sort of thought, well, if you're into animals, I guess then the only option is to be a vet. Like I wasn't very sure what was available. So I applied to do veterinary science at the University of Sydney, and I didn't get into it, which I'm actually very grateful for in the end, because I ended up doing my second choice, which was a Bachelor of Animal and Veterinary Bioscience. And originally I took it because I thought, well, it might be the backdoor kind of a way to get into vet science, and maybe that was something that I would enjoy. But it's actually an animal science degree. And when I started it, I was like, oh, this is what animal science is. And I absolutely loved it. So I continued doing animal science. And so through that undergrad, I did an honours project in poultry and realised poultry science was actually a big interest of mine. I really loved the sustainability of the industry. So I ended up doing a PhD with the Poultry Research Foundation at Sydney Uni. And then after that, I finished up and came to the University of New England out to Armidale here, because the poultry science group is so large and we have such amazing facilities and opportunities here. So one thing I learned over this little career journey into what I'm doing now is I just did not realize how many job opportunities exist, not just in poultry, but in animal science roles just in general. And that's something that I hear from people a lot. If I happen to be just chatting to someone and they ask what I do and I tell them I'm a chicken scientist, they're like, oh my God, I never knew that role existed. I didn't know about that job. So it's certainly something that we could be raising awareness of to people looking for careers. So I guess one of the more common ones is that people know about is that there's opportunities in animal science in university with teaching and research. But animal science is also a massive industry with elements of research. So within industry, they've got their own, lots of companies have their own research and development branches within a larger company. Heaps of technical positions in production, including on-farm, diagnostics, laboratory, sales, and there's heaps of different allied industries and products. So I think Robin's going to talk more about that side of things. And then there's also, you can go into the government sector and they have their own research and development. For example, the CSIRO is a pretty common household name. There's teaching, regulatory bodies, funding bodies, and also government laboratories as well. So there's lots of different job opportunities in animal science. And of everyone I know who finished their animal science degree at the University of Sydney, no one's ever had trouble finding work just because of the diversity of jobs that you can do with an animal science degree. So I'm all about inspiring students to get interested in just STEM careers in general, but certainly one in poultry science. And one way that you could do this would be to take on chickens at your school, and I'll talk more about that. But one thing you could consider doing with chickens would be to run your own chicken research trial. So, for example, you could run a research trial on laying hens. And what would that look like? Well, you could come up with a pretty simple experiment. For example, looking at 2 different feeds. So this is something that I do quite often in my research, and I'll talk more about that shortly. But you could come up with a name like, does a more nutrient-dense feed improve hen production? And then to test this, you could just have 2 groups of a few hens in each group, and you could buy one group a really cheap scratch mix and one more expensive feed like the champion layer feed, something like that from the stock feed store. And you just need either 2 small chicken houses to do this, or divide a larger chicken house into 2 and provide a feeder into each side. And then each week your students could weigh the feed, the feed into the feeders, so you know how much feed the chickens are eating. You can count the number of eggs that are laid and weigh the total weight of the eggs laid that week. You could look at parameters of egg quality. So these are all just really simple and basic measurements where you just really need a scale. And for the egg quality, you just crack some eggs open. You can measure the shell thickness with digital calipers. So I got a picture of some there. It costs about $20 from Bunnings to get a set of digital calipers, so it's quite accessible. And then another measure we often do with egg quality is just to measure the color of the yolks, which you can do with a yolk color fan, which you can buy online, and they're quite cheap. Or you could even just make your own. It's literally just a color scale from a light yellow to like a dark orange, just to show the yolk color. So an experiment like this, you might hypothesize that the champion layer or the nutrient dense feed would give the hens a better performance. So you're going to have maybe more eggs laid, maybe less feed consumed to lay that same amount of eggs. You might find that the egg shells are a bit thicker. And if you measure the yolk color, you might find that the yolks have a darker orange yolk, because that cheap scratch mix is probably just going to be comprised of grains and not really have much yolk pigment in it. So it's really quite a straightforward and fun experiment that you can do if you have hens in your school. So what has this got to do with laying hen research? Well, it's actually really similar to what we do, but just on a much smaller scale in research. So I've got some pictures here. The top 2 photos are of one of our hen research facilities here at the university, where we have multiple pens of hens. So ours can be sort of in a barn facility, or we can open the pop holes. You might be able to see them at the back of the pens there, and they can go out into a free range as well. And so in every trial that we run, we'd weigh the amount of feed that the chickens are eating, and we also look at parameters of egg quality. So we basically, every day, we collect the eggs, we count how many eggs the chickens laid, we weigh the eggs, we measure the same parameters of the shell thickness with the calipers, and we look at the yolk color, as well as a few other things like the albumin height and some other measurements, using this machine that you can see in the photo on the left there, which is just a very expensive machine, basically, to do the same thing you can do with a color fan for practically for free in your school. And then, yeah, we weigh the egg weight just using a really simple scale. Then we take it a step further. So that was sort of like the performance and egg quality traits. Depending on the type of trial it is, we might measure nutrient digestibility, so how well the chickens are digesting the nutrients in the feed that we give them. We often look at different health parameters. Some of these you might be able to do at your school too. For example, you could look at the feather quality of the birds. Are they pecking each other? Do they have a good feather conformation? What's their body weight like? What's their body condition score? That sort of thing. We take it a bit further in the lab, where we can look at the bones of the hens. see how strong they are, look at the mineral content of the bones, that sort of thing. Welfare is also another really important thing in poultry science. So like I mentioned, you can look at feather pecking scores and things like that. There's lots of guides online of how to determine like the amount of feathers that could be lost between chickens, things like that. We also look at plenty of other parameters like the health of their feet and their skeletal conformation and things like that. So we do a few different types of research. So my main area is in nutrition. So that's why I gave a nutrition example, I suppose. But there's plenty of other research done looking at, so we've got the nutrition, which is mainly looking at feed ingredients, feed additives, different feeding strategies. We can look at different health products. And of course, there's lots of welfare research looking at different housing systems, for example, cage versus free range. And also things looking at environment as well. For example, some of my recent research has been looking at food waste for hens, which is a nutrition trial, but we're also looking at how it could make poultry production more sustainable for the environment. So that was for hens. Then so hens are laying eggs, meat chickens are for meat. So there's two different main classes of chickens. So meat chickens, I guess in a school would be a little bit more challenging, but we can talk about that. But one example of a meat chicken trial that you could do in a school would just be to look at, again, nutrient density and just seeing if a more nutrient dense diet program might change the speed in which a meat chicken will grow. So again, you could just have a couple groups of chicks. You could feed one group a meat chicken starter for 3 weeks and then a grower for 2 weeks. So that means the chicks are going to have a higher overall protein intake because your starter feed has higher protein than the grower. And then you can have another group of chickens where you feed the starter for, say, only 2 weeks and the grower for 3 weeks. So they're going to have less protein intake. So then you'd be able to see that in the difference of the growth of the chickens. So to raise broiler chickens, they need a bit less space than the hens, especially from chicks. They're quite small. You just need some brooding pens. And the measurements that you'd be looking at for a meat chicken are how much feed they're eating and how much weight they're putting on. But an important consideration, so meat chickens, because you're brooding them from chicks, is that they need a heat source and to be kept warm. So that might be a bit of a constraint. The other is that meat chickens can't be kept after the trial ends. So if you do a trial for about 5 weeks, they'll be fully grown at the end of that. And then that's when they need to be processed or euthanized. So that is a consideration that might be difficult for some schools. I have heard of schools doing a little meat chicken trial, and basically they found a farm, like a small farm or even a backyard chicken keeper who grows their own meat chickens to process their own meat. And basically the school will just grow the chickens for the 5 weeks and then they can give the chickens back to the farm to process them. So in my research, we also do research with meat chickens. So we look at performance measures too. So looking at how much feed the chicken eats, how much the chicken grows. Again, there's a focus on nutrient digestibility. So we might be looking at different feed ingredients or feed additives, and we want to know how much of that nutrient gets digested. So we measure that. We also look at different health parameters. For broilers, we're really concerned about their leg strength and keeping them healthy as they grow. And we also look at welfare parameters for broilers too. So for example, all broilers are raised on the litter as they call it, but some producers are now moving more into free-range broiler chickens, so we might look at the welfare ramifications of that. There's also providing perches and things like that to broiler chickens. So I want to say that all meat, chicken and hen research is approved by animal ethics committees beforehand to ensure the animal welfare and also to ensure that the outcomes of the research are going to be beneficial to industry or to poultry or to the environment. So we want to make sure that the birds aren't used and nothing will come of the experiment. So as researchers, we have ethics committees, and I've also looked it up as schools also have a schools animal ethics committee, which you can find information on at the Department of Education's website. So the regulations for schools is that if you're keeping animals for education, you need approval from the school's animal ethics committee, and also if you're going to then do a little experiment with those animals, that also needs to be approved through the school animal ethics committee. So I think on the Department of Education website, you can find more information and reach out about that. Something else to consider before you get chickens at your school is your local council rules. Some LGAs may only be able to keep 5 to 10 chickens, so it's just good to double check what's allowed under your local council rules. That sometimes there also can be restrictions about roosters, which you may not think might be a concern, but if you get really young layer hens, sometimes one of them will turn out to be a rooster, so it's best to know what's allowed beforehand. Then you need to consider for your school, are you going to have laying hens or meat chickens, and consider the practicalities of which suits you best. So if you get a fully grown laying hen, it's practically a lot easier to look after, and their production span is a few years, so you could probably keep them for 2 to 3 years or sometimes even longer. Whereas the meat chickens, like I said, they because they're bought as young chicks, they have to be kept warm, they have to be grown, and then they have to be processed at the end of 5 weeks. So I guess for a lot of schools, laying hens are definitely the easier option. Another consideration is over school holidays and weekends, who will look after the chickens? Is this going to be someone who's dedicated to come in on those days, or will you have some kind of a volunteer roster? You'll have to show in your application to the school's animal ethics committee a pretty detailed plan, I think, about how the chickens will be looked after, how they're going to be housed, and plans for the school holidays and the weekends. Then when it comes to housing, so for a laying hen, it's a fairly simple weatherproof enclosed space. So that's free from the rain and an area that they can get out of the wind. So that's just for the enclosed space, and then they should also have an enclosed, like an outdoor run as well. Both of these need to be predator proof. So for example, you might have a shed that houses the chickens, and then an outdoor run area that it can have wire around the outside, and then preferably also have wire across the roof of it, and then a little wire skirt around the ground so that foxes can't dig underneath. Even if your school is in a pretty built up area, foxes are surprisingly everywhere. Some people just have like an 8-foot tall wire fence, but some foxes can be very wily and get over the top, as well as predators like hawks sometimes will take small chickens. So that just needs to be considered. The housing needs to be breed suitable. For example, housing for a laying hen just isn't suitable for a broiler. Broilers need to be kept warm, and they have all these other considerations. So rough space requirements, usually around indoors, you need about 0.4 meters squared per hen, and outdoor about 1 meter squared per hen. That's just a rough sort of idea of the space required. Some housing I see sold for hens online just for like pets. The space requirement is really small, and so if you happen to purchase one of these, you just have to be aware if you don't have a lot of space per hen, you're more likely to run into health issues or to have feather pecking problems happen where the birds are pecking at each other's feathers because they're getting a bit frustrated, they're getting in each other's space a lot. So then the husbandry, will the students be providing the day-to-day care, or is that going to be a staff member? What's that going to look like? So you need to consider feeding the chickens. So where are you going to get the feed from? Usually just you can buy a poultry feed from a local stock feed store fairly easily. The cleaning, so particularly if you've got laying hens, keeping the nest boxes clean is important to make sure you can use the eggs. Who's going to collect the eggs? Just doing a daily health check, which would probably be another important thing that you'd have to outline to the school's animal ethics committee. So that's just a really basic thing, just looking at the general health of the chicken. Are they moving around? Are they alert? That sort of thing. And of course, personal hygiene. So just making sure the students are washing their hands after they've handled the chickens. So the cost, so as far as like setting up an ag program in a school, chickens are a really cheap animal to make a start with. The most expensive component of having chickens is just the housing that you're going to keep them in. Feed is generally pretty cheap. A laying hen will only eat about 100 grams, 130 grams of feed a day. So it's not that much, and you can buy it in a pretty big 20-kilo bag. That might be it, I think. Yep. That's all from me.
Thank you very much, Amy. Much appreciated. If anybody's got anything that they want to ask Amy, if you want to pop it in the chat now, we can discuss it later, or you can ask directly, save your question and ask Amy directly after the next presentation. So next we've got Robin Richards from For Upskilling, who will talk about the different types of courses that are around in terms of poultry. Thanks, Robin.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to see schools wanting to learn more about poultry and thinking about potentially having some chickens so that students can learn to understand the poultry industry. It's just the most fantastic industry to be in. I've worked in agriculture for a long time, and my background is very, very different to Amy's. I grew up on a farm, and then I'm a real hands-on learner, so school was always a challenge for me. I always just wanted to be outside and do agriculture things and do things with animals. So I left school quite early, but it's not that I wasn't keen on education. I definitely started the vocational education train very early in my life, and I think if schools had chickens when I was at school, I definitely would have stayed. That would have definitely been one thing that would have connected me better with the system. So I did a Cert 4 in vet nursing, and then I did a Cert 4 in ag, and then I've done a Cert 3 in poultry production. And then I've moved on into leadership in education, and I've just finished a master's in adult learning. So I've definitely done a completely different trail to Amy, but at the end of the day, we're both working in the poultry industry and very passionate about the development of the industry, and we're both really passionate about supporting people to get going in the industry. So from all of the work that I did and all of the vocational education that I went through, I worked for a government TAFE for a long time, and then I left that and I started For Upskilling, which is a registered training organisation, and we are committed to agriculture specifically, and I think probably 80% of the work that we do is in the poultry industry. We are the only national provider that provides a lot of the courses in poultry. So the things that we do Cert 2 in Ag, we do Cert 3 in Agriculture, Cert 3 in Poultry Production. We also do Cert 3 in Pork Production. Interestingly enough, poultry and pork are very similar in terms of managing those farms and what goes on. So they work really well together in terms of education. We do the Cert 4 in Agriculture with a leadership and poultry focus. We do leadership and management because we also know that the industry needs managers, and often soft skills are hard things to learn on the job. So we support that. We do a diploma of agriculture with a poultry focus, and then we also do quite a number of skill sets. Specifically, the things that we do in schools, though, we run Cert 2 in Agriculture programs that we can tailor around poultry, or we also do the school-based trainees in the Cert 3 in Ag and Poultry and Pork. I did put a list of units there. I'm not going to go through them all for you today, but we definitely have some ability to move around. But I guess the thing that I want, some of the things that I did want to talk about is that there's a real roll-on effect when you have poultry. So one of the things is the minute you have poultry and then you have poultry feed, you then can potentially develop a pest issue and you start seeing rodents and a high level of rodents. So it's a great opportunity as well to then actually work through pest control and rodent control with your students at school as well. So depending on, and also then there's another unit called Collect and Record Production Data. So Amy talked about collecting the data and whether you're doing a research program or whether you just got chickens to introduce to students to an agriculture focus and to potentially support your hands-on learners like myself, and teaching them things like responsible animal care, and also teaching them food safety as well. Like you're producing a food, whether it's a meat bird or whether it's a layer bird, we are producing a food for the country. So there's a lot of food safety and quality assurance that you can build into having those birds as well, and teaching the students about the important role that farmers play in terms of putting food on the table and how the eggs actually get into the supermarket or how the birds get into the supermarket. So I think there's a really big roll-on effect of what you can actually teach students rather than just focusing on even just the chickens. There's a really big roll-on effect as well about that. So it's competency-based training. The training that we do, we deliver training sessions online. We also do a lot of farm visits and face-to-face sessions. Obviously, if someone's going to sign up as a school-based trainee, they need a commercial poultry farm or a commercial farm somewhere. We're also happy to help. We have a lot of contacts and networks. So if you do have a student who is interested in going down that trail, and then we have obviously workbooks, and we do lots of practical visits and whenever we can as well. What I thought I would do though is that rather than listen to me, I can take you to the Australian Eggs website, and they have some really great tools. And one of the tools that they do have is the Virtual Egg Industry Careers Tour, the Australian Eggs, along with the Chicken Meat Association of Australia, have invested a lot of energy, and they have resources that you can use in school to support you with the education side of things that work alongside your agriculture or your poultry focus. So the careers that I thought this is quite a good tool to go. Now I'm not sure that I need to reshare. Can you everybody see the Australian Eggs website or not? You can? Perfect. Okay, that's good. This is a really great tool for you to use. This is the Virtual Egg Industry Career Tour. I thought they don't go for very long, so I thought that I might just explore one of these. We've got a farm manager here who talks about his career and his role. We've got egg collectors, we've got egg sorters and counters. We've got people who work in maintenance, people who work in feed mills. So quite a range. Also over here, there's also ones about the egg industry career tour. So I might just play you one of these, and it's also 360, which is kind of cool. If I can, sorry, I just have to go back. Here we go. Let's go back and I'll show you one of the careers. I thought that we might talk about the egg sorter. So I'll just play this one for you. Maybe again. Sorry, I'm just going to make sure I've shared the sound. It's always a trick, isn't it? The sound sharing. Now we're right.
The screen just dropped off for me, Robin.
Listening? No, it's not playing the game. Let me try and share again. Sorry. Need to go. Can you see this lady collecting
Yep, we
eggs?
can see. Yep.
Sorry.
There we go.
My name is Philly. I'm an egg collector, and I've been working collecting eggs for almost 6 months in Pure Foods at the farm. Part of my job here as an egg collector, I usually stack all the eggs, and then when it comes to 6 stacks, I usually put them in the big pallets, and I do that until I get off to at least 4 layers of the stack. Yeah, it's total like almost 3,000, 4,000 around eggs we collect a day. So I came straight to uni from my country. I'm from a country, small island, Pacific Island. So I came here to study my Bachelor of Financial Management, and then I did study, I finished my study, and then I got a job in taxation, and I didn't like it really. I was looking for different opportunities, and I came to Foods and I applied here, and then I started collecting eggs at the farm, and I liked it. The thing I like about my job at the moment is work-life balance, because I get to work in the mornings, and the rest of the days I get off to do other things, such as me doing my schoolwork and other stuff. I go home and then, yeah, I'm happy.
So that's just one of them, but there's quite a range of those resources. Let me work out how to stop that now. Maybe go back to this. So for upskilling is as I said, we work with a whole range of people from I can't get rid of the thing now. We work with a whole range of people from schools to people getting started. We also have some programs that are for people who are brand new in the industry, that are just come in little videos and information and workbooks, as well as in Australian Eggs. If you haven't looked on the Australian Eggs website, they have a whole range of school resources as well to help sort you, and also just to help keep it interesting, and then help align the things that you're doing with the school to, in terms of education and understanding the industry and understanding things like biosecurity, husbandry, responsible animal care, food safety, and all of those things. And it's it's a great way to get kids interested in agriculture, and we need to keep feeding Australia. So I'm very keen to help and support in any way we can.
Brilliant. Thank you, Robin. Okay, so we might just open it up here now. We haven't got any questions in the chat or the Q&A, but if you just want to raise your hand, and then we can throw to you if you've got a question of one of our experts, anything about the training that's available or some of the trials. Yep.
Yeah, so the first question we've got from Anita are there any considerations when it comes to eating the eggs that are laid by the school chickens, except like washing them and things like that?
Robin, would you like me to answer, or do you want to answer?
Yeah, Amy, I would be talking about egg hygiene and clean nest boxes so that you don't wash your eggs. But Amy, you go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, like I mentioned, if you keep your nest boxes clean, the eggs should be really clean too. So you won't need to wash them. In the industry, we also candle eggs to check for small cracks and things like that can let bacteria in. So that can be done with like an egg candling torch fairly easily with the students as well. And that's another point at which you can have another learning experience about how to candle eggs. Robin, is that something that they can learn through one of your courses, or?
Yeah, we do a little egg hygiene program that is really about what's safe to eat and what isn't safe to eat, and how does bacteria enter the eggs, and how to then control that. So absolutely, we wouldn't be recommending that you wash the eggs. We'd be recommending that you keep your nest boxes really clean, and then people are using good hygiene, which Amy also talked about, but good hygiene so that the eggs are kept clean all the way through.
Awesome. We have another question as well that's come through. Is anyone doing integrated chickens and gardening? So this could be from you guys or from the teachers as well.
Chickens are good at wrecking the garden. So
Have you worked with any sort of schools that have that sort of setup? No?
no, I haven't done that.
No, but potentially, yeah, you could use the litter that comes out of so you might have wood shavings on the floor of the chicken house. Potentially when they get a bit dirty, you could put them in the garden.
And following on from that question as well is, can we use the eggs in our school cooking program?
I think that if you set yourself up with a little QA program, so the eggs were checked for, as Amy said, they were checked for cracks. And so that's really, just a little candling torch can actually, and shining a light through the egg shell, you can actually see whether there's cracks. And so recording that, and then recording how when the eggs were laid, and so then when they're used. So if you set yourself up with a little QA program so that you can track when the eggs are used, and you can track how long when they've been stored. So as long as there's also good storage, you're able to store them in a facility that keeps them at a reasonably cool temperature. I think there'd be absolutely no reason why you couldn't use that. Amy, don't know of any regulations where you wouldn't be able to use those. And it's all about just keeping yourself getting a little QA program set up so that it's transparent. So if for some reason something did happen and someone did happen to get food poisoning or something from that, then you could clearly show. I think it's highly unlikely if you follow some really basic key things, but if you did have that happen, then you could show that you were keeping a record of what you were doing, and that the eggs were as clean as possible. Yep.
If you wanted to double check on the legislative side, you just have to ask your local council. I think they'd be able to tell you.
We also have another question is, where is the best place to get our chickens? So any considerations with sort of sourcing the chickens, or whether schools would be best to go to get the animals?
So hatcheries and things where we often get chickens from, like farms or research settings, they usually do like really large numbers of chickens. So if you're looking for like a smaller number of chickens, local poultry auctions, if you're in more of a rural area, that's an area that's really good to get chickens from, or local breeders, that sort of thing. Especially if it's hens, usually getting hens isn't too tricky. There might also be local breeders that do like a meat type chicken if it was meat chickens that you're interested in. Don't know if you have anything to add, Robin.
I always recommend that if you can go to a commercial producer who will sell you small numbers of pullets. If you're going to go with pullets, you probably potentially pay a tiny little bit more for them, but they potentially will come to you vaccinated and ready to roll. And that's just one thing that you then don't. It's very difficult to vaccinate 10 chickens. You can't buy the vaccination in a small enough kind of dose to buy, because they sell it in 100,000 chicken doses. So we always think, and we can put you in to contact with some of those. I'm sure Amy could too. Some of those people that I always suggest buy them off a commercial breeder, only because then if you're going to buy pullets, because you come with a vaccine, or even if you buy day olds, if you're going to do day olds and put them under lights, then they'll come vaccinated from the hatchery as well. So, and I guess I'm just looking after the industry. The less unvaccinated chickens we have probably in the industry, the better.
So just following on for that, because we had a question earlier that some of the teachers put into our RSVPs around what sort of basic poultry care practices in terms of worming, lice, mosquitoes are there. So once they've been vaccinated once, do they need to be vaccinated again, or is it just a once?
In a commercial sense, they will definitely vaccinate for some diseases again and later in life. But if you buy a pullet already vaccinated and you only have a small number, then the risk of you being in contact with some sort of disease is way lower. And also the fact that you're not intensively farming, you've only got a small number of chickens. So I would think that once you have them, you wouldn't be vaccinating them again. In terms of managing those chickens, like really, and Amy, you can definitely help me out here, but I'm thinking just some really good husbandry practices, like making sure that they're not on wet litter. Like some really basic stuff like that is critical, because wet litter causes issues. So having a and Amy talked about this, having a setup where the chickens are well housed is really probably the most critical, because if you get that right, then your health issues are going to be almost next to nothing. As long as you've got good drainage, you keep the litter relatively, you keep it clean and you keep it dry and friable and all of that. So really your health issues are really ones where chickens are either overcrowded, they get wet. Amy, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll chime in. Yeah, totally agree. Prevention is better than cure for sure. Another thing to think about is to keep wild birds out of the run. So if you have a fully enclosed outdoor enclosure, like with a wire on the top as well as on the sides, you can make sure wild birds can't actually get in, and managing the rodents as best you can, because they can bring in lice and things like that. But also, the wild birds coming in to eat the feed, coming into the chook house, can drop lice and worms and things like that. So you just want to minimize that. And then with your daily health checks, you can just, when you're looking at the birds, part the feathers and just double check there's no lice there. They're quite easy to spot if they've got lice or mites. And then worming, if you've got a small number of chickens and they're not really in contact with wild birds, I mean, they don't often get a big worm burden anyway, but worms are just out there in the environment. So every 6 to 12 months, you can just use a wormer, and you basically just add the medication to the water. For most of them, you buy them from any pet store. So it's pretty straightforward with how to do that.
Following sort of on from that as well, we had a question is, where would you source best husbandry practices when working with chickens? Is there somewhere that the teachers can go to that might give them sort of a bit of a rundown or help with that sort of stuff? Is there sort of industry best practices that they can get a hold of?
I'm not too sure what the Poultry Hub has, Amy, but I know Australian Eggs has some really good resources that you can that you can access. We also have just a cracker of a textbook that's full of pictures. That is probably, you're only going to need one textbook per. And it's, when I say a textbook, it's really like a large magazine that talks about how to manage your chickens. That's a really good resource. But also, I'm not too sure about the Chicken Meat Association in terms of schools, but I know that Australian Eggs has some really good resources for schools, and they also have a curriculum. Their curriculum guide as well, where that, week 1 you can do this, week 2 you can do this, week 3 you can do that. So they've actually put a lot of effort and energy into trying to support chickens in schools, just to raise awareness of the career opportunities in the industry.
Yeah, our Poultry Hub, we have a little bit of information on the website about general things about the industry and chicken keeping and things, but definitely shout out to the Australian Eggs website. They have quite a lot and have, like Robin said, all that curriculum information. That's really, really great too.
And we had another question submitted earlier, and this is sort of looking at connecting with industry. What should be some considerations when approaching industry to establish a school partnership, whether this might be taking students out for a visit or getting someone to come in? What are some considerations that the teachers might need to consider before approaching this sort of partnership?
Well, I don't know, probably Robin's best to answer that one, but I'll just chime in and say biosecurity is probably number 1 on the farmers' minds. We organise placements for like university students, and biosecurity is always the trickiest thing. Is that the same for you, Robin?
Yeah, so most commercial farms won't want someone going on their farms if they own a aviary bird or a chicken at home or a pig, so that can be tricky. So but it's definitely doable. I do know some farms in our area, and I'm sure there's some farms in Queensland as well in your area that would arrange an opportunity for a visit, because it is important that we give students that opportunity. But the other thing that we've done a lot of is just getting the local farm managers. We've got some really great young farm managers in our industry, and I'm sure you've got them on your doorstep up there, young people who are actually managing farms. Getting them to come in and talk to students is just an ideal way to show. I always think young people are great, because it just shows that you don't have to get to be an old codger to really have a great job. Like, look at Amy. So I think that, getting young managers in to talk to school kids is great, because, people can see that there's real opportunities for younger people in the industry.
Brilliant. Just following on from that, how do schools, is there a list somewhere of poultry suppliers around Australia, or is there a industry peak body that they can go to find out where are their local industry? Is there an easy way to do that, or is it just a Google search?
No, definitely. Definitely there is obviously a collection of data around where the poultry farms are. So if it's layer, Australian Eggs is the place to go. And I'll just share with you I just got onto the Australian Eggs website, and this is their school website. So there's obviously for primary and secondary teachers. So I have a go-to person in Australian Eggs, so I definitely could ask her, how would you find out about the commercial farms that are around you? And then I'm sure the Chicken Meat Association does a very similar thing. I just haven't seen it, but definitely I would be going to your peak bodies.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah, Australian Eggs, the Australian Chicken Meat Federation. Local councils also know of properties that are licensed for poultry. And there's also the Farm Transparency Project, where you can look up where farms are as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Is there any other questions? Yep. Hayley? We're
So the
looking at,
question that's just come, oh, sorry.
You
Yeah,
go.
that's from me. Sorry.
No, you're
Um,
right.
We have an established chicken set up at school where we usually arrange to have highline browns brought in, and we're looking at expanding that and bringing in broilers, and also hopefully establishing a connection with industry to have off-site processing, because we don't really have those facilities at school. Is that something that's typically done, broilers with layers in a school community?
I don't have a lot of experience. Usually with schools, it's just laying hens. But you can definitely do both. The main consideration I have is just the biosecurity between the broilers and the layers. So when you get the broilers in, their young chicks, and they're going to be really susceptible to disease compared to the layers. So you just got to make sure that you house them separately. So for example, in at the university here, we have flocks of meat chickens and layers, and we just have them in separate facilities. If we're doing a daily check and we have to check both meat chickens and laying hens, we'll go to the little meat chicks first. We'll check on them first because they're the most susceptible to disease. And then once we've done looking at them, we'll then go to the laying hens, just because those layer hens are older. They've had a lot more time to get parasites, diseases, things like that. They're a lot more hardy than the broiler chickens. So yeah, best to do your broilers first and then go to your layers.
Okay, thank you.
excellent. Is there one last question? Sarah, did you have anything? No. Yep. Just before. Yep. Go. Oh, we can't. No, you might have to pop it in the chat, Marja. We'll share all these resources online as well. We were thinking of creating a Teams channel for you. Dual breeds are an option. Are they an option?
I was going to suggest when we were having the discussion about broilers that you probably don't do ducks and chickens together. Like, I just think that it probably is starting to make it tricky. I think that it would be better off just to go chickens unless you had an opportunity to keep them quite removed. I feel like you'll have less issues if you just stick with the one. But in terms of breeds of chickens, you definitely could have potentially different breeds. Like if you were going to run some Highline Browns with some Lohman chickens, I don't see an issue with that. They do have slightly different needs in terms of being high performance animals. But if you're running them in a situation where you're not expecting the high performance targets that a commercial farm might be expecting, you probably could cross those breeds. I'm not sure, Amy, what you think about that.
Yeah, you can definitely get from the heritage breeds of chickens like dual breeds that can be used for meat and eggs. So they're like a layer, but they're a lot more stocky, a lot more meaty than a layer chicken. You could potentially have a dual breed. They're not going to grow like a commercial broiler, but it could demonstrate the concept.
Well, brilliant. We really appreciate your time here today, Amy and Robin. Thank you very much. Having this open Q&A at the end has been an excellent opportunity for the schools to actually talk to industry. So we really, really appreciate that. As I said, we'll be posting this webinar online so you can see it on our website. If you want to jump on our Agribusiness Gateway website as well, you can have a look at the other webinars that we've got. If you've got any queries at all, just email us at ageducation@cqu.edu.au, and we will see you in a few more weeks, hopefully all of you, for the next webinar, which will be around starting an ag farm or enhancing your ag farm. So we've got the president from Quata coming along to speak to you, and someone from PAT down in Victoria to speak to you as well. So in the meantime, if you've got any queries, just send us an email and we can possibly connect you or ask the questions of our experts here and see if we can get a response around whatever queries you've got. But we really do appreciate your time. Thank you very much. It's our first one for the year. So excellent. Thank you.